Following Ukraine's defeated 5-month offensive, their summer-fall 2023 offensive, and now considering admissions even from across the Western media that this cross-river operation that Ukraine is conducting in Kherson, considering that that is now an admitted failure, we are starting to hear from the Ukrainian government itself indications that it is going on the defensive, or at the very least that they plan to build major defensive lines along the front. So we have articles like this from the Foundation for Defense of Democracies. This is, again, one of these government and corporate funded think tanks driving these pro-war foreign policies. The title of this December 5th, 2023 article is Zelensky orders Ukrainian forces to dig in. And it says Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said last week that he had ordered an expansion of defensive fortifications across the battlefront following the failure of Ukraine's 2023 offensive. Zelensky's announcement may signal that Kiev intends to adopt a defensive posture in 2024. Digging in could help Ukraine repel future Russian offensives while allowing Kiev to spare more troops for training in the West. But then it says, in the months prior to Kiev's spring counteroffensive, Russia built fortified defensive lines all across the battlefield and along the Russian-Ukrainian border. In some places, especially the area south of Orikhiv in Zaporozhye Oblast, where Ukraine concentrated its main effort during the 2023 counteroffensive, Russia built fallback lines behind the main line. These fortifications, coupled with extensive minefields, helped Russia thwart the counteroffensive. But then it kind of admits taking a page from Moscow's book could help Ukraine weather what will likely be a tough 2024. After taking heavy casualties during the counteroffensive, Ukraine's units need time to rest and reconstitute, and Kiev's Western backers currently lack enough spare artillery ammunition to resource another major offensive. Some could argue they can't resource any sort of major defensive either. It continues, Western shell production has begun to expand, but will take time to really ramp up. How long? They never really say. Consequently, Ukraine's artillery-centric military will likely face shell hunger next year. Russia, meanwhile, has received a substantial amount of artillery ammunition from North Korea, and it's ramping up its own defense industrial production. Russia will likely hold the initiative for much of next year, especially if Moscow conducts another round of forced mobilization. Fortunately for Kiev, Russia's General Valery Gerasimov will likely continue to squander men and material on ill-fated offensives like those at Vuhledar and Avdiivka, undercutting Russia's ability to reconstitute force quality. Well, that can and should be debated. And then it tries to argue, thus, while Zelensky may feel a political imperative to continue attacking in order to demonstrate progress to domestic and foreign audiences, a defensive posture would probably make more military sense. Ukraine could sap Russia's offensive potential, positioning itself to retake the initiative as Western shell production ramps up. Reinforcing Ukrainian lines and building prepared fallback positions could help thwart future Russian offensives. It could also allow Ukraine to defend with fewer troops. As Ukraine's top general recently noted, Kiev currently cannot easily spare soldiers who are deployed to the front, but with a better prepared defense, the Ukrainian military might feel comfortable sending more troops, ideally including some of its better, more experienced units to train in the West. And then the article tries to argue that these troops that are freed up to train in the West, they could return and conduct an offensive on a much larger scale than we saw this year, 2023. But this is all fantasy, and for multiple reasons. Number one, the US and the rest of NATO had trained tens of thousands of Ukrainian troops every year from 2014 to 2022. They built an entire army of NATO-trained soldiers. They began reorganizing the whole Ukrainian military to look and feel more like a NATO army. And then Russia began the special military operation, and that whole army, according to even Western sources, has been annihilated. It no longer exists. So what is Ukraine going to achieve by sending some freed up soldiers to the West to train over the course of, say, a year or even 2 years? What are they going to achieve in that 1 or 2 years that NATO couldn't achieve in 8 years prior to the special military operation? I think that is a valid question, and I have not heard anyone answer that question. I have heard people suggest that you can just build up brigades over the course of a couple of months and then send them off to the offensive. That was the logic and the reasoning that I heard from otherwise very serious Western analysts, like, say, Michael Kaufman. He was completely convinced that with NATO's help, Ukraine could reconstitute combat formations much faster and more effectively than Russia. The 2023 offensive proved that no, they cannot. It takes years to build up a brigade. When you look at a brigade, which is about 3,000 to 4,000 men, if you look at what actually constitutes a brigade, the different levels of skills and leadership qualifications, it will take years to build up an entire brigade. You cannot do that in a couple of months. You cannot do it in a year. I don't even think you could do it in, say, 2 years. So that's the first problem. The second problem is Ukraine already has significant fortifications along the line of contact. Some have been built up over the course of the last 8, 9, 10 years now. And it still is not thwarting Russian advances. When Russia decides to advance, it doesn't matter how significant the fortifications are, they're able to whittle them down, destroy them, and either kill all the Ukrainian troops trying to defend them or evict them from that area. So, for example, this FDD article mentioned Avdiivka. Let's look at Avdiivka. So here's a Guardian article. We will stand until the end. Ukrainian defenders of Avdiivka hold on for now. After almost a decade on the front line, the city is a wreck with just 1,200 people left, but it remains of huge symbolic value. In the first weeks of Putin's full-scale invasion last year, the Russian army swept across much of southern and eastern Ukraine. It was unable to conquer Avdiivka, however, where Ukraine's armed forces had built extensive fortifications and underground command posts once visited by Western dignitaries. The town is an anomalous bulge from Moscow's point of view, surrounded by Russian-controlled territory on 3 sides. Avdiivka is one of the most heavily fortified positions along the line of contact under Ukrainian control. And again, they say they have built these defenses up over the course of 10 years now. They have tunnels, underground command posts, trench networks. They're taking advantage of the built environment of Avdiivka, which includes these large, I guess you could depict them as high-rise residential buildings that make for ideal fortifications. And this was the same case in Bakhmut and also Severodonetsk and Lysychansk. These were all heavily built up areas that made for ideal defensive positions. Some of them had been built up, the defenses in these cities had been built up over the course of years prior to the Russian special military operation. And it did not matter. Russian forces brought in superior firepower. They destroyed the defenses. They either killed or drove out the Ukrainians. They took Bakhmut, for example. This was a very heavily fortified city. They took Bakhmut. They are in the process of taking Avdiivka. It even mentions in this Guardian article that that is what's happening. Again, if you just look at pro-Ukrainian live maps, every single day you see Russia increasingly encircling and closing off Avdiivka. They will cut it off and they will eliminate the Ukrainian presence there in Avdiivka. Remember Mariupol? This was a city that Russia surrounded. They completely cut it off. Remember, the Ukrainians dug in deeply in the Azovstal steelworks. They had these extensive underground tunnels and rooms, an almost impenetrable fortress, and yet it didn't matter because Russia was able to encircle all of Mariupol, cut off resupply to these fortified Ukrainians, and they starved and rotted to death under under the steelworks. And eventually they had to come out and surrender to the Russians. That is what's going to happen to each and every one of these fortified positions along the line of contact. And then the next question is, can Ukraine even build defenses that extensively along the whole rest of the line of contact? And I think the answer is clearly no. Now, the FDD article talked about Russian defenses, and I think that it's worth to just, again, go take a look at what the Western media was saying about Russian defenses as far back as December 2022. In this New York Times article, defenses carved into the earth. Russia is building a vast network of trenches, traps, and obstacles to slow Ukraine's momentum. Will it work? Yes. Yes, it did. Although there are actually some conditions, complications to that statement. They show photographs of the dragon's teeth, the anti-vehicle ditch. They have a cross-section diagram of the anti-vehicle trench, dragon's teeth, pillboxes, and trenches. If you keep going down, they show the map of how these defenses are all layered. Satellite images showing you, again, the layered nature of these defenses and just how extensive they are. There's also a BBC article about this. From May 2023, earlier this year, right before the offensive began, Ukraine war satellite images reveal Russian defenses before major assaults. And again, these satellite images of these extensive layered networks of defenses, they show you they're in Crimea, they're in Kherson, they're in Zaporozhye, southern Donbass. This was the area where Ukraine's offensive, they say potential Ukrainian offensive. This is almost exactly where the offensive struck. And you can see these layered defenses, and you can see Tokmak. Ukraine didn't even get close to Tokmak. They actually, as Mark Sloboda often pointed out at the time, Ukrainian forces never even really got to these defensive positions. So this idea that, and again, more photos and satellite images, this idea that Ukraine can just dig in, build layered defenses like Russia, and somehow that's going to stop the Russians just like Russia stopped Ukraine. That isn't actually how Russia stopped Ukraine, because Ukrainian forces never even really reached these layered defenses. They are still, to a certain degree, untested. So what did Russia actually do to stop the Ukrainian offensive? Russia used a combination of landmines, artillery, drones, attack helicopters, warplanes dropping glide bombs, rockets, including guided rockets, anti-tank guided missiles. These can be launched by teams of infantry on very small mobile vehicles. Most of this was done in the security zone ahead of all of these defenses. The security zone is a no man's land between your frontline defenses and the enemy's frontline defenses. You establish a security zone and you try to wipe out as much of the enemy as possible before they actually come to your defenses. And this is actually where Russia stopped the Ukrainian offensive, and they did it through overwhelming superior firepower, both in quantity and quality. Just to kind of give you an idea of what I'm talking about here, this is from this BBC article about the Russian entrenchments, and they show you these layered defenses, the anti-tank ditch, the dragon's teeth, the trench network. They show artillery positions all the way back here. The problem that Ukraine faces is firepower. It doesn't matter if they're trying to breach these defenses or they're the ones manning these defenses. They simply do not have enough firepower. If it was the Ukrainians in these positions and let's say 1, 2, 3, 4, let's just say 5 artillery positions, if Russia outguns Ukraine 10-1 in artillery, that means they have 5 times 10, 50 artillery pieces for Ukraine's 5. Some people say it's maybe 7-1 or 5-1. It doesn't matter. That is Ukraine's problem. If Russia has an overabundance of firepower that is able to target Ukrainian artillery, whether they're on the offensive or on the defensive, Ukraine is going to run out of guns and rounds sooner. And the same goes for anti-tank guided missiles, FPV drones, tanks, and everything else that's on the battlefield. Russia has all of these systems that they used on the defensive. They also have all of these systems they can use going on the offensive. And when I say offensive, I don't mean big arrow offensives like Ukraine tried to carry out. I mean this slow grinding, incremental, creeping forward along the battle line, using overwhelming firepower to just grind down Ukrainian defenses, which is exactly why building defenses is going to force Russia to conduct the operation in this manner, but that's how they're already conducting it. And I don't think building additional defenses now is going to significantly slow Russia down. Russia has military aviation. They can drop these 500 kilogram glide bombs on Ukrainian positions. They have 1,000, I think I've heard 1,500 kilogram glide bombs being used. They also have lighter ones that can go further. They have ballistic missiles like the Iskander with a 500 kilometer range. This is a longer range than the ATACMS, the longest range ATACMS that the US could send to Ukraine and haven't yet, at 300 kilometers. They also have cruise missiles and long-range kamikaze drones. The Garan 2, for example, can reach virtually anywhere inside Ukraine. They also have the shorter-range Lancet kamikaze drones. We've seen these used as counter-battery fire against Ukrainian radar sets, artillery positions, massed troops. They also have FPV kamikaze drones. We always hear about Ukrainian FPV kamikaze drones. As I pointed out, there are Western articles now admitting, Ukraine does have these FPV drones. They're very effective. They destroy Russian troop concentrations and Russian armor, but Russia also has them. They also have them in just greater quantities, 7 to 1. So whatever damage Ukraine is doing to Russia, Russia is able to do more so to Ukraine. Ukraine has HIMARS. We always hear about how great HIMARS is. Russia has the Tornado S, again, in greater quantities in terms of launchers and missiles. They also have a longer range than the HIMARS, the Tornado S. In addition to all of that, Russia has superior numbers of artillery systems, both the guns and the rocket launchers and the mortar platforms firing the rounds, and superior numbers of these rounds themselves. And again, we hear all of these different admissions by the Western media, anywhere from a 5 to 1 to a 10 to 1 artillery advantage over Ukraine. When you put all of this together, Russia simply has greater quantitative and qualitative means to strike at, destroy Ukrainian defenses and the troops manning them. This claim that Ukraine is going to shift to a defensive battle, they have defensive positions all along the line of contact. We remember the initial Russian incursion into Ukraine, the beginning of the special military operation. They sped along these roads. They went deep into Ukrainian territory. They went into areas where there were no fixed defenses. But at this stage of the conflict, there is a fixed line of contact between Russian and Ukrainian troops. The ability to do those type of deep incursions, that really is not possible anymore. It's not possible for either side to do that because both sides have dug in and hardened their positions. So is it a matter of Ukraine? Has Ukraine just been running around along the line of contact without fortifications? No, they've already built fortifications all the way up and down the line of contact. Could they deepen them? Could they make them more extensive? Yes, but to what extent? And to what extent will it be helpful? If you build additional lines of defenses, you have no trained manpower to defend them, and you have no arms or ammunition, or insufficient amounts of arms and ammunition to defend them. Will they make a difference? I think the answer is evident in heavily defended cities that Russia is still able to take from Ukraine. There's also this fourth dimensional aspect to this conflict that I think is escaping many Western analysts. They think only in 2 dimensions, it seems. They're looking at the map and they're looking at how much territory both sides have. And they see territory is not changing hands, so it's a stalemate, it's locked, it's frozen. But in reality, that's not true, because over time, Russia is in very significant ways diminishing key Ukrainian combat capabilities. They've exhausted their artillery, both in terms of the guns themselves and the levels of ammunition that they have. They've done the same thing to Ukrainian air defense systems. They have stretched to the limits the West's ability to replace those air defense systems. They've ground down Ukrainian trained manpower to almost non-existent levels. We see a recruiting crisis beginning to form in, or having already existed and growing in Ukraine. These are things that are accumulating over time. This is not a stalemate then. This is a war of attrition that is being fought decisively in Russia's favor. And as time moves on, Russia's ability to conduct increasingly effective military operations along the line of contact, that is going to grow. Now, I do hear talk of Russia stockpiling weapons, missiles, tanks, artillery shells, an accumulation of trained manpower that has yet to be committed to the line of contact. And could this all be for a big arrow offensive? I have consistently said that I don't see a big arrow offensive anytime in the near future. I've not heard the Russian military leadership talk about any sort of big arrow offensive. I hear them talk about maintaining this incremental strategy that has been working so well for them. But there is the possibility that you could saturate the defenses anywhere along the line of contact, the specific area along the line of contact. You could saturate them if you commit enough men and materiel to that specific point along the line of contact. That is something that we have not seen done during this current conflict. It's something that could be possible. It remains to be seen if it is possible. In other words, Russia sends weapons and manpower forward. Even though Ukraine is outmatched, they still have the ability to inflict high costs on Russian forces. But if you commit enough forces at a specific time, at a specific point, you overwhelm Ukraine's ability to fire on and destroy them all. So it is a strategy that Ukraine attempted to use against Russian defenses, and it failed dramatically. It's something that maybe the Russians are considering doing, considering their advantage in manpower and overabundance of equipment and ammunition. That is a possibility. I have not seen any evidence to suggest that that is going to happen. It is a possibility we should keep in mind. But this strategy or new narrative, whatever you want to call it, of Ukraine digging in, this is a misnomer. They've already dug in. They already have extremely extensive defensive fortifications that Russia has demonstrably overcome multiple times. They're doing it right now in Avdiivka. They will continue doing it all along the line of contact anywhere they decide they want to move the line of contact forward in their favor. That is what I think 2024 is going to look like. Again, barring any catastrophic local or total collapse in Ukrainian fighting capacity, I think we're going to just continue to watch Russia grind down the Ukrainians. I hope that makes it clear why Ukraine cannot dig in and use 2024 as a build year. It just isn't possible to build anything within a single year that is going to make any more of a difference than anything Ukraine had built up from 2014 to 2022 when the special military operation began. So let's keep all of these things in mind. Until next time, if you thought this video was useful, please like and share. Think about subscribing. It's free to do. It helps the channel grow. Please check the video description below for other places you can find and follow my work. Check the video description for all of the links that I referenced in this video, as well as for ways you can help support my work. I do not monetize my YouTube channel or any of the social media platforms that I publish my work on. If ads pop up, feel free to skip past them. They're not doing me any good. If you do want to support my work, please do so through Buy Me a Coffee or through Patreon. To everyone who has been helping support my work, whether it's through a one-time donation, donations month to month, or even if you're just helping share my work with others, that is all greatly appreciated. That is what makes this work possible. So thank you. And as always, thank you for watching.